Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Beyond Breakfast. So we left off last week with Rav Dessler talking to us a little bit about the idea of connecting to Hashem through rot, meaning people that are very involved in their relation with Borei Olam, where it's just a automatic kind of thing. They're not thinking deeply about their yadut. They're not thinking deeply about a connection to Hashem, right? They're thinking about just getting things done. Like, we have a minyan upstairs, 8 o'clock minyan, which I love. But it's very, very fast, and sometimes I feel like we're in a space where we're moving so fast. It's a tefillah for the sake of tefillah, but not a tefillah for the sake of connecting to Borei Olam, right? Like, we have to make that distinction. Like, the reason why we come to pray, the reason why we learn, is because all those things should be leading us to develop a deeper, closer relationship with Borei Olam. That's what we want. At the end of the day, I want to know God. I mean, Mavakesh Hashem, the tefillah itself is for me to be mitpalel, to be pilel, for me to introspect about who I am, who I want to be, so that I can come closer to Hashem. So he spoke last week about this idea that, we're so busy, we don't have time to think, and, the idea that the worst thing in the world to do is to believe that you're someone that has a connection when really your connection is somewhat severed. So he says over here, he's come to the conclusion that actions can be discussed into three headings. There's three different kind of masiyot. You have work. What's work? Avodah is any activity which requires physical or mental effort, can temporarily drive lust from a person's mind. It makes one forget sin, as the Mishnah told us. On the other hand, this work is usually of a mundane nature, and preoccupation with it is not likely to increase one's spiritual awareness. In addition, it usually leaves little time for Torah learning, meaning there's some kind of jobs that we have that are very much what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it takes too much bandwidth of the mind, right? You can't concentrate, right? There's a difference between being a plumber and being a surgeon, right? Difference between being a shoemaker, shoe repair guy, and being someone who is, involved in, litigation as a lawyer, right? Certain fields take up a lot of bandwidth, a lot of mental bandwidth. And while, of course, we want you to choose a profession that will support your family, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you have time to spend time learning and building yourself closer to God. So if you're in a job, most people are not thinking, I want a profession that gives me the most time to learn. If you look at all the Tanaim, what were they? They were, shoe repair guys, sanlarim. They were shepherds. They specifically chose jobs which gave them the ability to free themselves mentally, so they could have their whole entire day to connect to God. That's what they wanted, right? But we don't do this. So that's number one. So you have avodah. Number two says Torah im derech Eretz. This has been explained in various ways. He says the one that most appeals to me is that of Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin, and he explains that Torah and derech Eretz go well together as long as the Derech Eretz is itself Torah. The word Derech Eretz is always usually a reference to business, right? But over here, Derech Eretz is being used as not just business, but the way of the land as far as Derech Eretz is as far as building the character, but Derech Eretz is Torah itself. He cites that the warning of Rav says, Talmidim, I don't want to see you here during the months of Nisan and Tishrei. During these months, you can go earn sufficient money to support yourselves for the whole year, and then you can go learn for the rest of the year with an untroubled mind. Can you imagine for a moment telling your parents, listen, okay, I'm going home for 3 months, okay, I'm going to go work. I'm going to work hard for 3 months, make as much money as I can in those 3 months, so that I don't have to work for the rest of the year. Not worrying about the year after that. We're so bought into this idea, like I need to prepare for the next 20, 30 years. I got to pay for my mortgage, I got to buy myself a car, I got to go on my vacation, and we lock ourselves into a system where we're always worrying about money. No matter how much you have, there's never enough because you're trying to overcome that 30, 40-year gap. I think the average age in America today of someone who could actually afford to buy a home is 38, right? A 38-year-old today, where 40 years ago, it was 23 years old. A 23-year-old with a few years of work after college can get a mortgage today, 38. So owning anything becomes impossible today because prices are so high, and therefore people are looking for more and more, intensive jobs to figure out parnasah. I have a secret to tell you. No matter how much of an education you get, no matter how much you work, that won't change how much money you're supposed to make. Sorry. I know guys that work for 1 hour a month and they make a lot of money. And they're lucky. They could sit there, they could learn, they could do whatever they want to do. You know what I'm saying? And I know a lot of people who work 60, 70 hours and they're not making any money. I know doctors and dentists that are poor, right? They have nothing, okay? Your parnasah, the whole idea of going to work, Rav Dessler says, is you go to work because you're trying to find God in the world. And the whole concept of me getting a job is for me to create a kli, a vessel, that allows God to give me parnasah in the most natural way. Can't be supernatural, but natural. It's certainly not impossible to get a job for 3-4 months where you have your basic needs. You know, totally possible to do it. I mean, it's possible. I did it when I was younger. I don't know if you could do it today, but it was definitely possible. During these months, you can have sufficient money to support yourselves for the whole year, and then can learn for the rest of the year with an untroubled mind. It's unthinkable, states Rav Chaim, that the great Amoraim, who were of Rav's disciples, would disengage their mind from Torah for days on end. They undertook physical labor, which left their minds free to engage in deep mental study during their work, and their needs were so few that they earned in 2 months, exclude the festivals, lasted them for 12. Another interpretation is given by the sage of the Midrash. This is from Midrash B'mira Rabbi. He says, there's an oft-occurring phrase in the Torah, a flour offering mixed with oil of mincha, right? So the rabbis comment that just as flour offering must be mingled with oil, so too Torah has to be mingled with good deeds, right? The Mishnah says Torah is good with Derech Eretz. What does one give nachat, right? A play on the word of mincha to his creator. When one occupies himself with Torah, at the same time is lavish with good deeds and guards himself from sin. The whole purpose of learning Torah itself is not for the academic. I'm telling you, I see this all the time. A lot of guys are learning Daf Yomi, a lot of guys learning Gemara. People come to classes, they think of it as an academic process of an intelligent understanding of a subject. Like they're not studying Gemara, they're studying ancient Babylonian literature. They're studying, an ancient subject, and they're trying to understand ancient laws. That's not why we learn Gemara. The purpose of learning of anything, the Torah itself, is to move you to ma'asim tovot. We want you to be a good person. And if the learning you're doing is not making you good, something is wrong with it. Something is wrong. It has to lead to action. Good deeds, together Torah can elevate a person to the level of the Shema. Then he says, number 3 is Shalol Lishma. What about good deeds done for the selfish motives? There is Shalol Lishma, which is in conflict with inwardness. And there is Shalol Lishma, which helps us attain inwardness. The difference between them is very simple. He says, yirat shamayim, present or not, yirat shamayim does not just mean that there's fear of punishment. It is awe rather than fear. It means awareness and deep conviction that I have to run my life according to God's will. And I am accountable to Him for the way I do it. Both Avraham Avinu and Yeshayahu, the prophet, point out the absence of yirat shamayim as the main cause of moral failure. Today, what's going on with the left and the right is exactly this. Reshit chokhmah yirat Hashem. If there is no fear of heaven, there is no wisdom. It doesn't work. You can't have it. So you have today this Meshuggah who killed Charlie Kirk, right? Where is he coming from? We know he's coming from a very leftist ideology, right? And this is part of the transgender culture, right? Why is it that so many of the massive shootings in the last 5-6 years are all coming from this small group? I'll tell you very simply. You see, when we live in a society where we can no longer talk about reality, right? If you're going to tell me that I need to call you by your pronouns, if you're going to tell me that I am not a man, that I am a woman, and you have an obligation to allow me to go into girls' lockers, to a girls' locker room, right? If you're going to go ahead and tell me that you don't call me him or her, my pronouns are they and them, right? If you're forcing me to change my language, to use language which is false. What's really happening is you have a whole entire group of people that are living in fantasy land. They're not living in reality. Whereas the people on the right are grounded in truth. They're grounded hopefully grounded in some kind of moral truth. I'm not afraid to go out and have the conversation and be polite about it and respectfully disagree with you. But they say that if I use my words against them, I'm creating violence. You understand what that is? It's a complete perversion of reality. So in their twisted perversion of reality, you can go ahead and do anything. I can kill anybody. Who cares? You're immoral. These people are all fascists, horrible people. They're furries. This guy's part of the furry people. I didn't know this stuff existed before. That people get dressed up as animals and do all kinds of things like an animal would. It's sick. This is mental illness 101. And the fact that we can't call it out is a plague on this country. But what he's saying over here is that that the idea of yirat shamayim, right? This country has been under attack for over 75 years it's every single major institution to remove God from the land. Destroy the church, destroy the synagogue, destroy the nuclear family, take everything away, everything that is sacred, take away God from this world, and you got nothing at the end. There's no yirat shamayim. That's what he said last week. Abraham said, there's no yirat shamayim in this place. This is a dangerous place. Right? What's crazy is that some people are saying right now that it's safer to live in the EU, in Abu Dhabi, than it is in New York. The difference is that we have freedom of speech here and they don't have freedom of speech over there. But yet there's still more security there than there is here, which is crazy to think about it. That people in the world are recognizing that if America falls, this great republic falls, freedom of speech is lost forever. And people are going to trade, by the way, you'll see, people are going to trade freedom of speech for security, 100%. But what we're talking about is, at the very least, I want to live in a land with people that has yirat shamayim. Famous Russian refusenik, his name is Natan Sharansky, who was a minister in several different positions in Israel. He was he decided that he wanted to learn Hebrew in the former Soviet Union, and he was arrested for doing so. And then later he became part of an underground movement of people that were resisting against the Russian government. This is in the 70s. He got married on July 2nd. On July 3rd, he was arrested, put in jail for 9 years. His wife Avital went to America and lobbied very hard to get him free. Eventually he was freed. He says, he wrote a book which everyone has to read. It's called Fear No Evil by Natan Sharansky. An amazing book. Everything he wrote 3 books. That was, I think, my favorite out of all of them. And in Fear No Evil, he talks about that in jail, if you have a choice between speaking to an atheist or someone from another religion, whether Islam or Christian, whatever it was, he would always trust the Christian and the Muslim before any atheist. Why? Because they had yirat shamayim. There's a moral principle there, he says, that the atheist doesn't have. The atheists were always the one ratting everybody out because they justify their behavior for self-preservation. If there's no yirat shamayim, for me, yirat shamayim is everything. When we lose yirat shamayim 100%, we're in trouble. We're in big trouble. I have a cousin who is somewhat, not very religious, Israeli. He moved to California. They had a job there. They lived there for 2 years. They had to get out. The schooling for their kids was horrible, left-wing agenda, crazy stuff. They moved to Texas for 2 years. And he was telling me how happy he was there. Why? Because when they have fire drills in Texas, in the public school, right, there's one person in every classroom that is responsible for carrying out the flag, the United States flag and the Texan flag. You can't leave the classroom without having some kind of dignity for the country that you live in, right? And unfortunately, again, these are things that, so much of this country has lost. There was a time where people would go to school and they would pray in the morning, right? There was something there, the idea that you're beholden to something more than yourself. He says, but Avram Avinu and Yishai point out and share the absence of yirat shamayim as the main cause of moral failure. Avram told the Philistine king that their civilized behavior counted for nothing, since fear of God was missing. Yeshayahu told us in the name of God that all our acts of outward piety are worse than useless, are worse than useless, since the yirat shamayim is not sincere, but mere outward attitude adapted by habit. But in the presence of sincere yirat shamayim, an abundance of action, even selfishly motivated, can serve as a shield against evil and a stimulus to inner arousal. Which means that if I am selfishly thinking about just me, but I'm doing it because I'm afraid I'm going to have a bad year, I'm afraid of being punished by Hashem, that shalol l'shma is okay. Well, there's no yirat shamayim. You're just hedging your bets, just in case. I know someone who fasts in Yom Kippur because he's not sure if it's the oraita, if he should or should not. So he does it just in case, tick the box, but he doesn't believe in it. That's never going to get him to a place of lishma. The only way it becomes real is first you got to decide whether or not, and this is why I tell, if you're ever getting into an argument with anyone about any mitzvah in Judaism, stop. Don't have the argument. The first thing you need to figure out is, do they believe in God, number one. If you don't believe in God, don't ask them about, why do I have to do this mitzvah on Shabbat? Why can't I eat kosher or not eat kosher? Don't even have the argument. The only conversation is, do you believe in God? And then the second conversation is, well, they say, yeah, I believe in God. Okay, great, that's important. Number two is, do you believe that God gave the Torah to Moshe? Do you believe that there's a Masorah? Because if you don't believe that, then there's no point talking about the mitzvot either. Okay, but his point over here is ultimately that we could go ahead and involve ourselves in all sorts of things all day and all night, but if it's not predicated in yirat shamayim with a real desire to connect to Borei Olam, you are not moving anywhere. And therefore, the only thing you can do right now in preparation for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is to figure out how you can make that awe, not fear of Hashem. I love to study science because I see the wonder of Hashem. You know, the Chachamim say that the sun has a sheath, it has a covering, a tent over it. Today, scientists are saying that there is a sheath over the sun. There's a tent. That if you look at the core of the sun, the core of the sun is a nuclear reactor, and it's burning at 15,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Right? It's hot. The outer part of the sun is only at 6,000 degrees. Right? It's cooler outside than it is on the inside, and therefore the outer part of the cooler part of the sun holds back much of the radiation that's actually coming from the nuclear reactor in the sun itself. So the Chachamim 2,500 years ago talking about a tent, a sheath over the sun, and today scientists are saying, yeah, there's a sheath over the sun. Right? So when you study the brilliance of Chachamim and the brilliance of the universe that you live in, it's very hard not to see and feel that awe that God created a world that is perfect for you. But Hashem, tomorrow we're going to talk about his section on never giving up and never despairing. Have a great day, everybody.